Welcome back to part 2. Today we continue building from what we did last week, where I wanted to create a LUT that neutralized the colors, gave all the colors the same amount of brilliance as well as saturation. It took the biases away and then fixed the actual targets to the primaries, where blue now shows up as blue. So I'm using my neutral LUT, my Q.C50Neutral LUT, on the C50 to make sure that all my primaries are balanced. And this is going to be our starting point. So in today's video, we begin to use all the different 35mm lenses to determine if after we apply a neutral LUT to a body, whether the colors actually shift. And what I'll do is I'll put side by sides of both what I would call the neutral palette. I'm using the RF 28-70, so Canon RF 28-70 f2, because that is the lens that I use to calibrate my Q.C50Neutral LUT for the C50. So we will then be able to see if in fact colors shift. The second thing you all should know is that I am going to be learning this and viewing this or discovering this along with you. In other words, I'm not going to shoot all this, go look at it, come back, and then give you guys my thoughts. Rather, I'm going to go ahead and shoot, get it all expedited and go through them quick. And then I'm going to leave comments or a comment pinned on the bottom of this video so that you all can see what it is that I think in case any of you guys might be interested. So with that, I think we should get started. Okay, we are starting with our test, and the first lens that is on the Canon C50, again in open gate, is going to be the Canon RF 35mm f1.8 IS STM. There's no way I'm going to remember all these names. Some of them are really long. So I have a little cheat sheet notepad here so that I can make sure that I get the information correct. I'll also make sure that I add either a little graphic telling you what lens I'm on so you guys know what it is that we're doing. And again, I will make sure that we do side-by-side comparisons. But this should now give us the ability to see if, in fact, after I calibrate for this chunk of a lens on the C50 with Q.Neutral, if using different lenses is going to create a shift. And this will give you guys the ability to look at them. You could stop the video, pixel peep if you want to, but then get a sense of how they perform. The other thing I'll do, because all of these lenses are able to stop down to f2, so I don't need to change my exposure at all. Obviously, I'm not going to change my white balance at all because that would affect the colors. This is as neutral, as boring of a test as I can make to determine if, in fact, there is a color shift or a saturation shift, or what are the characteristics of the lens as to how it's interpreting the actual scene. So with that, let's move on to the next lens. Okay, so we are now on the Canon RF 35mm f1.4 L VCM. And the one thing that stands out to me, the biggest difference between the VCM version over the STM version is the actual field of view. It appears to me that the VCM has more coverage, like there's more in the frame compared to this 35mm STM. They're both from Canon, they both say 35. They both cover full frame. It's kind of interesting. And as I mentioned, we're going to be shooting all of this at f2. So the colors we'll find out together, but the field of view difference right away, honestly, it surprised me because I had to reframe a little bit just to get closer to what the original frame was. I had to pan down just a tad, but it gives you guys a sense. I'll also say that the VCM lens, this 35mm, I really like this lens on Canon cameras. It is an exceptional performer on Canon cameras. It is not an exceptional performer on cameras that don't have the lens correction data to process the image with the lens correction. Because if this VCM lens was on, say, my Red Raptor, the wall here, the little divider, room divider thing behind me, those lines would be really skewed. And it's just, I don't know. It's the way that the VCM lenses are created. Are they sharp? Yes. Do they work beautifully on Canon cameras? Absolutely. Do they on cameras, or do they on Red cameras, since those are the only cameras that I have that also have an RF mount? And the answer would be not really. So VCM lenses, from my take, they're perfect for Canon cameras. They're not great for Red cameras. Let's move on to the next lens. And now we are on the NiSi Athena 35mm T1.9. Of course, we're shooting this at T2, close enough to f2, and I don't have to adjust my exposure or use any type of additional filtration, which is the reason why we're shooting at f2. The Athenas are by far one of the most neutral and sharp set of lenses that I've ever shot on. They perform exactly the same on Canon cameras as they do on Red cameras, as they do on Sony cameras, as they do on Blackmagic cameras. They are an excellent set of lenses that truly, I would say they are underpriced, because that is how well they perform. And yeah, I mean, you guys have seen the videos on YouTube. They do a really good job with everything from breathing to the way that they handle highlights to the way they flare and so on. I just really, really enjoy the Athenas. To me, it's one of my favorite looks because it gives me the exact type of palette that I need when I'm working on corporate or commercial work, which is essentially 100% of what I do, with the exception of, the occasional YouTube video. But now you'll be able to see if the colors are affected, after I do my neutral LUT on the C50, and see side by side whether my sweatshirt looks different or the pen looks different and so on. And we can determine and discover that together. So with that, let's move on to the next lens. And now we've moved on to the Thypoch Simera-C 35mm T1.5, of course, at T2. This is an interesting set of lenses for me. It's a set of lenses that I have not used on paid work. We've had them in the studio for a long time at this point, since they were released, essentially. And I really do enjoy the look. I do think that they're great for creative work. I don't think they, and maybe you guys can let me know in the comments if you guys use them for corporate or commercial work, but they haven't found a spot in corporate or commercial work for me. Anything more creative, anything more personal, yes, absolutely, simply because the only person I need to answer to at that point would be myself, not a client, not an agency, not a director or anybody else who is going to be ingesting the footage that I capture. And it's not to take anything away from them. I really enjoy the fact that they're small. In fact, when I had the Nikon ZR, which I don't anymore in case any of you guys are wondering, I had planned, and the reason why I purchased these was in part because I wanted to have the smallest possible package that I could bring with me on location. And unfortunately for me, the Nikon ZR, with the labyrinth of equations that you need to remember so that you never ever screw up exposure, became overwhelming to where it sat on the shelf. And hoping that they would give us exposure tools that were reading the R3D log seems like it's probably not coming. Hopefully it is. And for all of you who enjoy shooting on the Nikon ZR, just know that I really also did enjoy it. R3D was the main reason why I bought the camera. And unfortunately, that Nikon exposure tools are what broke me. And I realize everybody's different. But for me, that was my breaking point. That was the reason why I decided I couldn't keep it. And I trust all my other tools far more. And in fact, if I need R3D, the truth is I have a Komodo X and I have a Raptor X. So between those two, they can pull all the weight. And as convenient as having the Nikon ZR was, it just didn't work out for me. I'll just say that. But I realize that it produces an excellent image, and that with the right level of patience and maybe not jumping from one system to another and dedicating yourself to learning that one Nikon ZR exposure system 100% is absolutely worth it for everyone who decided to keep theirs and was still using theirs and creating beautiful things. For me, it just wasn't the thing. So with that, I think we have enough where you guys have seen the samples. I'm really curious and I can't wait to find out what this all is going to look like when it's all said and done. So let's move on to the next lens. Okay, and now we are on another manual lens. This is the Leitz Summicron-R 35mm f2. And I really enjoy the look of these Summicron-R lenses. I have 3 of them. My buddy, Brian, actually traded them to me, so I never went out hunting, finding them, and collecting them. My buddy literally did all that work, and then we were exchanging gear one day, and these were part of the exchange. So I'm really happy that they ended up in this studio, because that is how I discovered these lenses. And I really do enjoy the way that the colors are rendered, the way that the image has its own separation, the way that everything is rendered off of this glass is just really cool. It's like punchy with the right amount of punch and contrast. Because one of the things that I've noticed, and I don't know if I'm just changing my palette, my taste for images, but one of the things that I've noticed a lot when I'm looking at, other creators on YouTube is just how much lack of contrast they introduce into their final looks as they're working with a variety of lenses, whether it be anamorphic PL lenses or some of the vintage ones, or even modern ones for that matter. One of the things that I've always enjoyed about shooting on RED cameras is the ability to have all of that contrast in the right way without crushing any of the colors or any of the midtones, anywhere along the spectrum, while still giving me that creamy background bokeh and separations and such. The RED sensor is phenomenal for that type of work. And Canon has, in many ways, really tried to walk the line between the way ARRI sensors, which I would say are less contrast, they're more subdued contrast, and the RED look, which is, again, what I would think or would say is more contrasty. And Canon has always sort of walked that line in between. So the way that this lens, the Summicron-R, renders on a Canon camera is really a sweet spot for the way that I like the image to look like. So we have one more lens to go, and that's this little tiny Voigtländer, which I'm excited because this will be the first time that I actually use this lens and I get to see the characteristics of what it has to offer. So let's move on to the next lens. Okay, this little lens is actually really fun. It's fun because it is so small. It's an M-mount lens, just so you all know. It is fully manual, which really means if I'm here, I'm already out of focus, even at f2. And this is why I'm looking at my monitor, because I'm trying to make sure that I kind of stay in focus. I'm shooting this by myself, and I I'm digging the way that this little tiny setup looks on camera. I wish you all could see what I'm looking at because it's kind of cute. It's just really small. And it's amazing to me that a little tiny lens like that is producing an image that looks or rivals a bigger lens like this, although it doesn't have autofocus. So then there's that, right? Because we all want autofocus when we're working by ourselves. Otherwise, images might be soft and then they look like you shot them at 720p or worse, or are completely unusable, which is, I guess, most cases. But this now should give us a sense of whether the colors do shift as we've been looking at side-by-sides. And I'll be sure, like I mentioned, to leave my comments in a pinned comment below the video so that you all know what it is that I discovered, what I had to deal with during my edit as I'm dropping in my one-click Q.Neutral LUT for the C50. And then if we're lucky, the colors, or at least the primaries, stay on target. And then maybe that becomes a one-click LUT for the C50. And for anyone who might be interested in test driving it, I think I'd be happy with, if you guys wanted help with making it available probably to the first, I would say, 75 people that ask for it, just so that we could get a sense of how other people expose and whether it works for them, and make adjustments before we make it public and available to everyone. So if you guys enjoy this type of content, be sure to subscribe, follow, and I'll catch up with you guys next week. Until next time, I'm Carlos. Take care.